Hello there, behind me is St. Peter's Church, Munich's oldest church here in Munich's Old Town. And well, there are other churches nowadays that are older than St. Peter's Church, but this is the one here in the Old Town that's the oldest one. And it has a lot of secrets, and one of the secrets is here behind me in one of those, has to do with one of those windows. So join me on a tour through St. Peter's Church here in Munich. St. Peter's Church stands on Petersbergl, Peter's Hill. In the 12th century, the Guelph Duke Henry the Lion of Bavaria ruled here and did that with the bridge of the Bishop of Freising. The dispute between Henry and the bishop that this triggered was then resolved in 1158 by the emperor in the Augsburg Schied, Augsburg arbitration. There a place was named Forum apud Municem. In Latin this means marketplace near the monks. And the name of today's city of München, or Munich in English, is derived from the monks Munichen. And the monks named in this document lived here on Petersbergl. So this little hill is the oldest part of Munich. St. Peter's itself is not quite as old. The Gothic building that forms the basis of today's church was consecrated in 1294. There was a Romanesque predecessor church, but it was demolished to make way for the new building. It is Munich's oldest parish church, but there are churches today that are older than St. Peter's. The Romanesque Holy Cross Church in Fröttmanning, dating from the early 13th century, is actually the oldest church in Munich. But since Fröttmanning was a village at the time and did not belong to the city of Munich, that doesn't really count. Over the centuries, St. Peter was naturally expanded and adapted to the taste of the time. The Baroque period in particular had a major impact on the church, supplanting and building over the Gothic art. The most striking external feature was the Gothic double spire, which was rebuilt to its present appearance after being struck by lightning in the early 17th century. The interior is also mainly Baroque in style. However, renovation work in the 19th and 20th century revealed some Gothic treasures. These typical Gothic clustered pillars were discovered behind plaster and masonry. The greatest late Gothic treasure can be found at the front of the left aisle, the Schrenk Altar. It was completely covered during the Baroque period and was rediscovered during renovation work. It is the only Gothic sandstone altar in Munich. It was donated by the Munich patrician family Schrenk. The most famous relic of St. Peter's Church can be found at the front of the left aisle. There lies Saint Munditia. She was a Roman martyr from the 4th century. Not much else is known about her life. The Munich merchant Franz Benedict Töger acquired her in 1675, or rather received her as a gift from the Pope through an extremely generous donation. And since the Romans liked to accept donations and have catacombs full of skeletons, no one knows for sure whether it's really Saint Munditia. But that doesn't matter to the Catholic Church. You have to believe that the relic is real, then it works. At the beginning of the 19th century, during the Enlightenment, displaying entire skeletons was considered somewhat embarrassing, and Saint Munditia was hidden away. Since 1883, however, she has been on display again. She is the saint of single women and sometimes prostitutes, but that is more of a popular belief than official doctrine. The most significant work of art, however, is the Baroque High Altar. It was created by Igit Quirimasam, one of the Yazam brothers, among others. And here too, Gothic elements are hidden in plain sight. In the center of the altar sits St. Peter interpreting the Bible. The figure was probably created around 1500 and was part of the Gothic predecessor altar. The tiara, the papal crown, is particularly noteworthy. It can be removed and is also removed during the sede vacante, most recently between the death of Pope Francis and the election of Pope Leo XIV. The figures surrounding Peter are church fathers such as Augustine and Athanasius. When you turn away from the altar, you can see the main organ. Although it's a modern instrument dating from 2003, I was impressed by its beautiful sound. Unfortunately, the ceiling painting is modern. It is only painted in the Baroque style. This was of course because St. Peter was severely damaged by bombs during the war. So severely in fact that after the war holes were drilled for explosives to demolish the church. Fortunately, private initiative fought for its preservation, and reconstruction began as early as 1946. I have two more things to show you outside the church. One is another major attraction, the church tower with its 8 clock faces, also known as Altar Peter or Old Peter in English. When asked why the church tower has 8 clocks, Munich comedian Karl Valentin replied, "So that 8 people can read the time at the same time." You can climb Old Peter for €5, but you need to be sure-footed. Perhaps you've seen Tim Burton's Batman. I always think of the church tower scene when I climb it. But the reward is a fantastic view over Munich city center. And then there's a small spot on the northernmost window of the apse. A small cannonball was walled in here. In 1742, the Austrians besieged Munich during the War of Austrian Succession. The ball struck the church. It was picked up and walled in during a later renovation at the end of the 18th century to commemorate the defensive capabilities of the citizens and the church. The video ended up a little longer than planned, but St. Peter has a lot to share and many stories to tell. And I also have a lot to share when I show you the city of Munich, and afterwards you will have many stories to tell. Here's my homepage and email address for that. Until the next video, Philip.